Hello and welcome back. This is Don't Watch at Night, a spooky little podcast dedicated to Latin American and Spanish language horror. And I'm Valerie, and we are back today with another Don't Watch at Night Revisited. And today we're taking a look back at episode 2. So this is our latest series where Verónica and I are bringing you some of the oldest episodes from our catalog. We're bumping them back up into your feeds for 2 reasons primarily. Number 1, we're turning 3 years old this summer. Which means we're embarking upon our 4th year of this show. And 2, once upon a time, Don't Watch at Night had a different show name. And so in an effort to bring our earlier catalog under the Don't Watch at Night umbrella, if you will, officially, we are reposting some of these earlier episodes. Now, the originals are still down there in our arsenal where you always found them. You can still find them there for now, but this way, you're getting to re-listen to some of our older stuff, and we've made it really convenient for you. This is also a good time to bring new weirdos into the Don't Watch at Night fam, so please spread the word. Tell them they can come check us out and take a look at our Revisited series. So in this episode 2, this was where Verónica and I watched 2017's Verónica, directed by Paco Plaza. We've actually done a few Paco Plaza films at this point. So this one stars Sandra Escacena in the title role. She's an amazing actress, and this was a really fun, genuinely spooky film, as many of Paco Plaza's films are. I believe this one is a Netflix film, so you can find this streaming on Netflix. And there is a prequel. There's a prequel to it called Sister Death, and we did do an episode on that one as well. So before we got to Verónica and I spent a little bit of time talking about some of the elements of horror movies that we find particularly scary, tropes, if you will. And so for us, I think we both kind of agreed that movies that incorporate children, scary. Movies that incorporate the supernatural, scary. I'm trying to think of what else, but I'll just let you go ahead and listen to it and see if any of those ring true for you also. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. 2017's Verónica. Enjoy. We're back. This is our 2nd episode. We managed to successfully get an episode out, and that's an amazing feat. And we're talking more about movies and books. What we thought we might start off with is just sort of running through our individual picks for what we think makes for either a really great scary movie or like things that really scare us in scary movies. So Verónica, for you, what are the things that you either really scare you in horror movies or scary movies, or things that you just plot devices that you think make for a really good story?
I think the things that affect me more, that scare me more, is like the ones that have more of a kind of a psychological suspense bent to it, that's kind of more thought-provoking, involves a little more just involving the brain and just kind of getting those deep primal fear levels of psychological, kind of almost psychological warfare. I also am super creeped out by kind of the evil spirits, demonic spirits, those kinds of things. Those kinds of things scare me more than just like, your slasher horror serial killer type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then creepy kids. I don't like creepy kids.
Well, see, you and I have some similar. So is that it, or are there other things that come to mind?
As far as like plot elements, of course, a creepy score, music sets the mood, and the right kind of music can definitely heighten the fear factor for sure.
You and I have similar things, and I find that interesting because I'm wondering if that's sort of like a tell of kind of our culture a little bit, because I also have hauntings or anything sort of paranormal related, like you said, spirits, the unexplained phenomena that some people don't believe in. And I've seen and heard on other podcasts, I've heard people talk about the fact that those kinds of elements in movies don't scare them as much, specifically because I guess if it's not something you believe in, if you just like say you don't believe in ghosts, then that's not going to be as scary to you as say like a movie where you're outrunning a serial killer or something like that. And I guess I get that. For me, just as with other things that I hold in high, like I always say, respect the sea, because the sea can absolutely kill you. So, you have to have a healthy respect and regard for the sea.
Right.
I always say the woods. I mean, that's also on my list of things that I find particularly scary in movies. The woods at night. I don't mess around with the outdoors. If you find yourself in a horror movie and you have to, it's just never a good idea to take yourself from the inside and put yourself in the outside at nighttime, because that's just always going to, you're either going to wind up dead or you're going to wind up running terrified from an attacker.
There's going to be no exploring strange noises from you. Absolutely
you
not.
You don't have a lot of things working for you in your favor when you put yourself outside in the woods. So like the woods,
I do see the because serial killers obviously exist in real life. They're that's an actual thing and definitely something to be scared of. But I think like maybe for you and I, we were brought up in church, going to church. And even though I'm not affiliate with a specific religion now, I am spiritual. And so I grew up believing in the existence of God. And if you believe that, if you believe in good, then you have to believe in evil. So
yeah. It's like if you have notions of a heaven, then you must have notions of a hell
right.
or something like that. Yeah. I mean, I have a healthy respect for things in the ghost realm, just because who's to say whether or not that exists or not. And if you can contemplate for even a second that it might exist, then contemplate that it could absolutely kill you. So, there are lots of movies that sort of, I think, do this really well. Have you ever seen The Orphanage, Ron?
No, not yet.
Never seen it. Okay. Well, that'll have to be one that we see, because that's a really great one.
Add it to our list.
The Orphanage jumps to mind as sort of a really great film that does that sort of spirit, paranormal, haunted house establishment pretty well. Obviously, I know that The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix, that was a really great series that lots of people raved about at the time that it came out. And yeah, I mean, I liked it.
Yeah, I think the last movie I saw with that kind of element was that I actually saw at the movie theater, because a lot of scary movies I tend to watch at home. The last one that I actually saw in the movie theater was The Conjuring.
Oh,
the first
really?
one. Yeah.
Well, you went to go see a movie, or I guess maybe you didn't see it in theaters. The one you told me about it. Something.
Oh, The Black Phone?
The Black Phone.
Yeah.
Was that in theaters, or you saw that at home?
I saw that in theaters too.
Okay.
I guess it does have it does have a little bit of a paranormal element, but it was also just, for me, more of that psychological drama suspense to it. So it was a nice mix of both, actually. That was a good movie too, so if you haven't watched that one.
Who's in? I want to say I know who's in that one. Was that Ethan Hawke?
Yes, Ethan Hawke.
Okay. I remember like seeing it and just not. I mean, I so rarely get out to see movies, but that is something that I hope to change as we move forward. The last thing that came to mind when I was thinking about stuff was masked attackers. So specifically, I'm not talking about like somebody who wears like a ski mask, like they're going in to rob a bank or something like, but specifically like think Leatherface, think like just a creepy sack kind of thing that it's like, it shouldn't be a mask, but they're using it as a mask. There's something about that that's so, for me, it's that psychological thing. It's so unnerving to see in a movie, or if I were to see it out in nighttime outside, which I would never be outside at night because of what I just said. But, someone wearing just a weird mask, they're oddly disguised. It's just something about that would just quickly send me into hysterics. Like it wouldn't just be me out trying to outrun an attacker. It'd be like, this person is clearly demented, and it would send me over the top, I think. So those are things that for me make for good scary movies. We're going to be talking about 2017's Verónica, which is directed by Paco Plaza, starring Sandra Escacena, Consuelo Trujillo, Bruna Gonzalez, Claudia Placer, and Iván Chavero. Iván Chavero plays Antonito in the film.
He was so cute.
So I'm going to give a quick synopsis of what the film is, and then we'll talk kind of what we thought about it. And we won't have to go into like scene for scene about it quite so much, because I don't expect that we're going to have as many plot questions as we had about Mal de Ojo. So anyway, here's the synopsis. This is taking place in 1991 Madrid, Spain. So early 90s, which for me is a golden time for fashion, for a lot of the scary horror movies of the 90s were great. So anyway, during a solar eclipse, a teenage girl and her friends want to summon the spirit of the girl's father using a Ouija board. However, during the session, she loses consciousness, and soon it becomes clear that evil demons have arrived. So espíritus, they reference that in the film. So Ron, we both just watched this last night. We both had to watch it alone. So what did you think of it? What were your initial thoughts?
I liked it. It wasn't, I won't say it was quite as as scary as I thought it was going to be, which maybe was good because I was watching it by myself. But I did like it. I thought kind of it had that definite kind of combination of kind of religious and evil spirit definitely going for it. I liked kind of the relationships between the siblings, how Veronica, as you know, see what happens when you're the oldest. You've got to like put yourself out there between your younger siblings and demons.
I was thinking about that. I was like, man, the older siblings. This is now 2 movies, if you remember. Like 2 older siblings just have it the hardest in these horror movies. So,
yes, it's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I enjoyed it. I thought the kid actors were all great, and it was spooky enough, and it kept me, definitely kept my attention throughout. I just didn't think it was like over the top scary to where it wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be.
I mean, that was what I thought. That's what I was preparing for, because I didn't read anything about the film before we saw it, but I had just seen some headlines about how apparently when this movie was pushed out onto Netflix, it was sort of billed as like, people are so scared by this movie they're not even finishing it. And I was expecting, man, this is going to be too much. But I didn't feel like it was something I couldn't handle. And yeah, I mean, I kind of like the element of a Ouija board in the movie. And I was even going to maybe do a little bit of research on Ouija boards to talk about. But then I thought, what I know about Ouija boards is that our mom always made it quite clear that we were to never have one. And we were to never dabble with those.
Don't open those doors, like the movie said.
Don't open those doors. And then, of course, she makes her and her friends, which, by the way, she's got the crappiest friends after all of this goes south for them. And she's the one feeling the effects of it more so than any of them. They kind of just abandon her. But they commit the quintessential mistake that they fail to close the door before their session ends. And so that's what kind of unleashes all of this junk. But yeah, I thought it was really great. I thought that I couldn't help but feel for her having to take on so much of the motherly role for her siblings because her mom is never around, which, by the end of the movie, I was just getting increasingly frustrated with her mother because I'm just like, she is going through some crap and she has nobody. She has no friends anymore.
Well, and it's definitely a case of a parentified oldest child who's having to kind of and there are reasons for why she's having to kind of step into that almost parental role over her younger, non-identical twin sisters and then a younger brother. But it seems like their father has passed away, and so the mother, I'm not sure if she just worked at that bar or restaurant or if she owned, like maybe her and her father owned it, because they did have that picture of her father holding up looked like a pizza. I don't know.
No, it was paella.
So now was it paella? Okay.
It was paella.
So now she's kind of having to run that business by herself. So of course it's late evening hours. So pretty much the oldest daughter, Veronica, that has to kind of get the kids fed at night, get them bathed, get them into bed. She's also, because her mom works so late, she's the one who has to get them up in the morning, get them breakfast, and get them off to school. So definitely a lot of responsibility for her. I did think the timing that they did the seance was kind of weird. It's like the middle of the school day, but okay.
Yeah. Well, so I thought that was unusual. That's also where we meet that nun, the nun with the
Sister Death is what they call her.
Nun with the creepy eyes, but she's just blind. She's blind. Yeah. And so her eyes are white. But yeah, they call her Sister Death. So we get to meet Sister Death, who I thought, I honestly wanted her to be a bigger character. I kind of thought that there would be more of a role for her once everything starts going bad for Vero, because, she's sort of the one who seems to know the most about what Vero is experiencing and seems to know the most about these spirits that are plaguing her. But it's sort of like she has like 2 scenes with the girl, and then she's just like, well, gotta make it right. I'm gonna go light a candle for you. Good luck.
I know, it was like, could you be any more cryptic and vague? Like, just tell her what you know. So she just kind of leaves her hanging, like, oh, you messed up, you did a bad thing. And
I didn't make a note of this, but it is coming to mind. I thought that our introduction to, you and I both going into this movie expecting it to be almost too scary to get through. So I was like on guard for the first half of the movie, just like waiting for it to get too intense. And then the first time we see I guess we'd call him a demon, spirit, whatever it is. The first time we see him, I thought they did that really well, because do you remember she's moving through her living room to go turn on the TV that had came on, and you see him coming down the hallway I thought that was really well, because I was just sitting there watching. I was like, oh, there it is. I thought that was really well done. I thought that the layout towards the end of the movie, as you just start paying attention to things, the layout of the house is really weird to me. It's just like one long hallway.
Yeah, I was interested in the layout of that house, because there was at one point, you remember, where she's like, it's almost like she's looking through a window across like a courtyard or something into her younger sister's bedroom. So I'm almost picturing the apartment like in a U shape, maybe.
Yeah, that's what it seemed like, because there's that scene where she's looking at her sister's window, and I'm like, isn't she in the house? And then I'm like, is that all one house? And then she's running. The hallways just go on for freaking ever. So
that's another thing with scary movie, when the setting, when the place is almost a character in and of itself, which wasn't so much with this book. That would be more like, the Amityville Horror, where the setting is almost a character. Well, it is a character in that movie for sure. But I did like scary movies always seem to be placed. People live in all these like really cool places that are like, I don't know. Do you ever do that when you like walk into a house or a building and you're like, wow, this would be perfect setting for a scary movie?
Oh yeah. You may not remember. I'll have to go find the photo. But when Mom and Dad were down in the valley, and she sent you and me some photo of some house they found for sale in La Feria, and she sent us the photo, and it was just like, that's a good house for a murder, for like a murder mystery. But it was like this old, hacienda that just looked abandoned. And I was like, that looks like a great murder house. But
I did think the way the movie started was interesting, because it starts, I think the date was, what did I write down? I don't know if it was June or July, but the 15th of 1991, set in Madrid, Spain. And it opens with, there's an emergency, like a 911 call coming into the police station. So you hear like the kids screaming in the background. You hear, a young girl saying, he's here, he's in here. Police respond, they go up, they walk into a room. And you can tell by the expressions on their faces that they're seeing something extremely disturbing. And then it cuts to 3 days earlier, which is when, the kind of pick up what led to that point. But when that scene played, and I was like, oh my God, we're going to see something really disturbing. So I was like you, I was kind of geared up for the worst, because I was like, oh. And then my first thought when we met all the kids was like, please don't let it be the little boy.
Well, I know.
That was like my first thought.
At the end of the movie, when she's, it's like she gets her sisters out, and then she realizes she doesn't have Antonito with her. And that's the part where it's just like, oh God, like, thinking he drowned in the bathtub or something. And then she goes back and she finds him in the closet, and she's holding that blade of mirror that she broke. And I was just thinking, please don't hurt Antonito. I was like, please don't do it. I was like, if they kill this kid, I'm out. Like, I'm done with this movie. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was a great classically scary movie. Paco Plaza, evidently, this came across in some of my other digging around for movies. He did the Rec series, Rec as in record, REC, which is like I think those are like found footage kind of movies. So, those like the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah.
I think that's what those are. And there's maybe like, there's at least 2 of those, maybe 3 of those in a series. So I thought, well, that might be interesting to watch at some point if we can ever find it. This movie, Verónica, is on Netflix for anyone who hasn't seen it. It's currently on Netflix. But I thought it was really great. Ron, did you know that this is based on an actual case? Did you know that?
Yeah, I went and looked it up. Well, I just wanted to I always like to see like what people say about the endings of movies, because I don't expect happy endings at the end of horror movies, but I think there's a little part of me that's always rooting for things to turn out well for everybody.
Right.
And so when it doesn't, I always like to, go online and kind of see what the people's thoughts on the endings were. And so that's when I saw that it was based on an actual case from Spain. Yeah. Vallecas, is that how you pronounce it?
Vallecas, I think. I said the same things last night, and Alex kind of made an interesting, accurate comment, I think, because I said, like, yet again, we're only 2 episodes into this, but yet again, it's another movie where it's like, quote unquote, final girl is not a final girl at all, actually. Like, she doesn't get away. She doesn't escape it. And he goes, yeah, I think that's a uniquely like American need to have our, not necessarily a happy ending, but like as happy as one can be in a horror movie. Yeah. We need a survivor. We need some sort of like, somebody has to make it. And I guess like in this case, like there is no final girl. She's not a final girl. She sacrifices herself to save her siblings.
Yeah, but I did read about that. Now, obviously they took a lot of, changed some things, but there were a lot of like little details that were the same. Of course, I think the name of the real girl was Estefania Gutierrez, who was 18. And there were some similar, like, well, in actual real life, she died in a hospital. They could never really pinpoint what she died from. She'd been having like, after the seance, and the seance, or not the seance, but the Ouija board, I guess, is that a seance? The Ouija board between her and her friends they were trying to contact the deceased boyfriend of one of her friends. hands. So
Yeah.
not her father like in the movie.
So, so there was like that Diana character, Diana.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that was
similar-
actually her friend's name. And then after the nun came in, found them doing the Ouija board, broke it in half. By witness accounts, there was some sort of puff of smoke or something that Estefania breathed in. And then from that point on, she apparently started having things like seizures, and she was seeing shadows, which they did incorporate into the movie. You know, you saw the shadow of the man thing, creature kind of moving across the walls. But she actually died in a hospital. They could never really figure out what was causing all of her symptoms and why she died. And police didn't actually get involved until about a year or two after her death, because the family started experiencing like all sorts of paranormal phenomenon in the house, you know, like doors opening that were shut, you know, sounds, things like that. So, and it was 3 police officers that went up to the apartment, just like in the movie. So that was the same.
And one of the things I saw was that
the face burned on the picture
did actually happen. One of the things that I read was that it what makes it such a memorable case, that at least a lot of is very well known in Spain, at least, is that this is sort of that rare case that where the paranormal experiences are documented by law enforcement themselves, because they witnessed it. So it was just sort of a bizarre, interesting story. I was wondering about that. Again, I've purposely avoided spoilers before I watched the movie, but you know, those ending scenes after she dies, and they seem to be showing images of like perhaps real police photographs of the scenes of the house. You know, it really does give you the vibe that it could be based on a true story. So then I went digging and looking, and
I think that's what made me look it up, because they look like actual crime scene photos. And so I went and I was like, hey, is this a real thing? And it was. So yeah, I think that's what made me look. Oh, speaking of wondering if this is an actual thing, kind of just like a random thought that I had when they're watching the eclipse through the negatives, like photo negatives, is that a thing? Like
I don't know. I was wondering
you could watch an eclipse through the negatives.
Because I was like, does that protect your eyes? I don't know. I wouldn't be telling the children. And then a lot of the children weren't even holding. So what, for those of you who haven't seen the movie, what it is the teachers told the kids, bring photo negatives, like film photo negatives, and you can kind of wear them over your eyes like you would 3D glasses, and you can watch the eclipse. And so I have never heard that before. I've never seen it. So
I've never heard that
does
either.
That work? But then some of the kids in the courtyard weren't even really doing it. I wanted to be like, get that over your eyes, boy, like protect your eyes. So yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah. One thing that kind of jumped out at me from the movie also, well, 2 things. When like at the end, when Veronica is doing the Ouija board thing again with her siblings in the apartment, I like wrote down, well, these kids are never going to sleep again. But
right. Like these kids are going to need lots of therapy.
But I did think that there was kind of, the movie was kind of speaking towards the theme of grief and loss, because even though she was being kind of vague, and the blind nun, the one they called Sister Death, she was telling Veronica, whatever you don't say goodbye to stays with you. And that just kind of, you know, because obviously she's doing this whole Ouija board thing because she wants to communicate with her deceased father. And so that line, just, you know, whatever you don't say goodbye to stays with you, just kind of really jumped out at me as like, that's a great point just to say about grief. You know, if we can't say goodbye, if we don't have that closure, then it just kind of stays with us. And you know,
that's it. I didn't even think about that, but that is a really beautiful sentiment towards like grief and how people process it and how they move forward, not on, but move forward with it. I was reading about how I guess there's going to be a prequel, I think, which may cover more of, we may get to hear more of Sister Death and more of like how she came to be Sister Death, perhaps.
Well, good, because she didn't tell us. She didn't tell us much, and I was like, a little more information, please.
That would be an interesting story. I would be up for seeing that, because I thought that was definitely a character that I would have liked to have seen more of. But anyway,
potential prequel in the works.
Final thoughts on the movie. Would pitch it to others. Would watch it again. Any of that stuff. I think I would definitely watch it again. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. Wish there'd been a better outcome for poor Veronica, my namesake. But
right. Did you know that this movie was named for you? Yeah. Okay, and so after this section where we talked about 2017's Veronica got to listen to me. Veronica got to listen to me go on and on about Nightmare on Elm Street. And when I'm talking about the first one that came out in 1984, because believe it or not, I had never seen it. Prior to that, I had never seen it. So I got to watch it for the first time as part of our second episode. And I talk about the use of religious symbol in that film. And in a lot of films of the 70s and 80s, we even see it pop up later in films like Scream. And if you look at Nightmare on Elm Street, it makes you look at Scream with fresh eyes if you're a dodo who never saw Nightmare on Elm Street before, because like looking back at Scream now, I can see all the references to Nightmare on Elm Street, both Wes Craven films. All of the resources from that original episode are going to be available on our episode blog, same as it ever was. But I have found additional resources for this revisited episode that I will be posting in our show notes as well, just so that you have access to some newer information. For example, one of the articles we've linked for you titled How Religion and Horror Movies Come Together to Form a Very Powerful Experience by Anna Levi, Amanda Roberts, and Rebecca Cushway. They say classic films of the 60s and 70s relied heavily on Christian imagery and lent into public hysteria over things like satanic panic. Think Rosemary's Baby of 1968, The Exorcist of 1973, and even Carrie, 1976, very obviously Carrie. And then the 80s and 90s brought in themes of divine punishment and mysticism with films like The Entity, which came out in 1982, Stigmata, which came out in 1999, one of my favorite 90s movies, and End of Days, which also came out in 99. There was another article from AP News called Why Religious Themes Make for Such Good Horror Movies, and it's by Holly Meyer, and it has a quote from Brandon Graffius, who's a biblical studies professor at a seminary in Detroit, and he's also an expert on Christianity and horror, and he says, religions and horror tackles similar questions about what it means to be human, how people relate to one another and the world. He says so much of religion is about how we grapple with the reality of death, helping us make meaning even in the face of that reality. Horror really serves that same process as a way to reflect on death. So yeah, interesting stuff. Listen to my thoughts on Nightmare on Elm Street. I freaking loved it. And I would go on in our subsequent episodes to watch a few more films in the Nightmare on Elm Street catalog. Folks, something you may not know about me is that I have never seen any of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies because, well, number one, the first one came out when I was 2 years old. And so that just was not on my radar. But then as I got older, anytime we would be like at Blockbuster or Hollywood Video, and I would see like the cover, Freddy just struck me as way too unpleasant of an image to process. So I was just like, nope, not going anywhere near that. That looks too scary. I'm not doing it. So I just managed to become a full-fledged adult who has never seen any of the Nightmare on Elm Streets. But currently on HBO or Max, whatever we call it, currently they have at least the first 5 movies in the franchise available. I think there are more. I have no idea how many there are. But what I have decided to do is I'm going to go through and watch the first 5 and then talk about them a little bit here on the podcast and kind of give you my take or my thoughts anyway. So as someone who has never seen them before, I'm a total noob. What we're going to do is this week 1, we'll be talking about the first film, and then second week that we have Welcome to Elm Street Corner, we'll be talking about the second and third films, and then the final week 3, we'll be talking about films 4 and 5. So, and then that'll be it. We'll kind of stop there. I know that the first 5 does not cover the very popular, much beloved Freddy versus Jason. So, if there is some sort of a desire for us to take a look at that one, then we can definitely go from there, assuming I can find it, assuming I can get access to it. Anyway, before I give my top notes on this film, Ronnie, is there any franchise that you've never seen?
Hellraiser. I've never seen any of the Hellraiser movies.
Interesting. And was there a reason why you avoid? It looks unpleasant? You're not wrong. I've heard that it's unpleasant.
Yeah, it looks unpleasant. As far as like the old school nostalgia, I've never seen any of the Leatherface movies.
Wait, Leatherface or Hellraiser?
I'm sorry, Leatherface. Hellraiser. Who's Leatherface? What's Leatherface?
That's Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I don't know that I've ever seen. I was going to say Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think I've seen bits and pieces of some of them, but I've never seen one all the way through.
Have you seen the first one, like the original?
No, I don't think so.
Well, I guess I've only seen the first one, the original, and I've only seen the first one, the reboot. And I never saw the subsequent ones because, again, that kind of gets into the gross grotesque stuff that I don't always like. But I mean, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. If you're listening to this podcast and you're like, no, those are the best movies ever made, please tell us. So anyway, here I go. My thoughts on Nightmare on Elm Street. Came out in 1984. Wes Craven, as we all know. I wrote down, this was campy horror, fun-loving good time. This was just great. I'm kind of sad that I put this off for as long as I did because I thought this was a fun one. It was definitely 10/10, would watch it again. This will probably have to be put on my Halloween rotation from time to time. I thought it was really fun. It was very interesting to see the long-running trope of like sex-crazed, promiscuous teens versus like virtuous, wholesome teenhood at play that's obviously present in so many horror films of like the late 70s and early 80s. The other thing that's really prevalent.
Yeah, back then the virgins always lived. They were like the last ones standing.
They were the only ones worthy of surviving. So
it was an indictment on teen sexuality.
Yeah. So and it's really interesting because like I wrote down, because religion also at play. At one point, the night that Tina, the blonde, is killed, you see Nancy, who's, the heroine of our film, you see Nancy clutching a crucifix that she pulls down from the wall, quite literally clinging to religion to save her. And I wrote down that you see that in films a lot of the late 70s, like Carrie, the original Amityville Horror. You also saw religion come into play, obviously with The Exorcist. I think that was like earlier mid-70s. You see religion come into play with 1982's Poltergeist, which, for anyone curious, that's my birth year. So I like to think of that as my birthday movie. Obviously, you also see that same trope come into play later with the Scream movie franchise, which is obviously also Wes Craven. So deliberately borrowing from lots of the tropes that exist in these movies as a way to sort of play on the stereotypes and tropes that are created. I was at the height of my, I guess, teen power when the first Scream came out. And it was fun to see almost like the direct references to this movie, to Nightmare on Elm Street, that Scream ties in, that I didn't pick up on at the time because I'd never seen Nightmare on Elm Street. Johnny Depp in Nightmare on Elm Street, very much like...
That's right, I forgot he was in that.
Yeah.
I totally forgot he was in that.
Well,
just like Kevin Bacon was in the first Friday the 13th movie. That was kind of funny.
Really? I did. Well, see, that's another franchise I haven't seen. So
you've never seen any of the Friday the 13th movies?
Wait. No.
There's a lot of those too.
I have seen at least, I've seen some of the
Friday. At least the first one.
I don't know that I've seen them in order because it was always based on like, well, whatever was on TV at 11 o'clock at night. That's what I would watch. So I don't think I've seen them in order. So when Johnny Depp enters Nancy's bedroom, he climbs up like this rose trellis or whatever. And it's just really funny because it's like we see Skeet Ulrich do that 14 years later in Scream. And so, yeah, like throughout all of Scream, Skeet, who I think his name is Billy Loomis. Yeah. Billy is almost channeling Johnny Depp in appearance and wardrobe. So yeah, I thought that was a really fun revelation that I'm clearly coming to the game way late on. But I was like, ooh, I get that reference. When I was watching this movie, you saw it a lot happening in the first half of the movie with the girls, Nancy and Tina. When you are moving through a situation where you are definitely getting creepy vibes, either you're outside at night, which you should never do, you're walking in an abandoned warehouse or in like a wooded area, that is not the time to announce yourself over and over by calling out things like, who's there? Or is anybody there? Or calling out for your friend who's missing, just sort of announcing yourself again and again and again. Because if you're going around saying like, who's there? Is anybody there? Like, yes, someone is there. That's your like instinct telling you that you're in trouble.
You should be in stealth mode.
That's exactly what I put. I was like, be in stealth mode. Better your chances for surviving. But yeah, it happened a lot in the first chunk of this movie to the point where I was just like, girl, you gotta stop talking and just like get through this quietly and stealthy.
I'm just gonna say, because back when that movie came out, and I did not see that one in the movie theaters either. What year did it come out?
1984. So I was 2.
Okay, well I was in high school, but I think I was like maybe a freshman or a sophomore. It wasn't taken as campy back then. It was kind of like with The Exorcist back in the day. I mean, I didn't see that one in theaters either, but I remember hearing in the news stories about how people would actually get up and walk out of the theater because they couldn't take it. Whereas my teenagers think it's campy. I mean, they would call that campy. So it's just kind of interesting how, across time, the perception of these movies can change, maybe according to, maybe we're just all more cynical, or we've seen more and
again,
exposed to like real world crap and violence that
this kind of brings us back around to the heavy religious component in all of these films. Because if you look at films like The Exorcist, The Omen, and I don't remember when The Omen came out, but The Omen also falls into this mode, and Carrie and Amityville and Poltergeist, like all of these films that heavily featured religion, as though the mindset of studios and filmmakers at the time was, or not even filmmakers, the mindset of studios and studio executives at the time was, if we're going to make these movies that are all about this great horror for this time, for this era, we have to feature God in it somehow. Otherwise, we're never going to get it greenlit. People are never going to go see it. People are going to reject these concepts that we're talking about in these films because it's just too violent. It's too grotesque. It's too disturbing. So we better throw some Jesus in there so that people know, so long as you pray about it, you'll be fine, or whatever. I don't know. But that's kind of an interesting.
That's actually another franchise that I've never watched, The Omen. Because again, we've got the demonic evil, we've got the creepy kid.
So ooh, The Omen is. I can't remember if I've seen the rebooted ones, but The Omen, I didn't see the second. Like, I'm not a real big fan of sequels in horror movies, and if it's something like the original was such a classic, like The Omen, Rosemary's Baby, it's like we don't need an Omen 2. We don't need a Carrie 2. And I think there were subsequent Carries, and it's like we don't need those. We don't need a Rosemary's Baby 2 or whatever. So I always say don't touch it with a sequel unless you're going to do it really well, and unless there's a reason to do it beyond, this was such a box office hit, let's do it again. There has to be a reason for it. I did some digging. And I'll link this I'll link this article in our show notes. But I did, after watching Nightmare on Elm Street, I came across an article called The Untold Truth of Nightmare on Elm Street. And so I wrote down a little bit of extra trivia for us. So tell me if you knew any of this, but did you know New Line Cinema, which is the studio that put Nightmare on Elm Street out, New Line Cinema, prior to merging with the WB in 2008, enjoyed a high rise thanks to the Nightmare franchise. And it turned this struggling little studio into a titan that later brought us films like the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, so that was really interesting. So Freddy Krueger kind of put them on the map. There is a science behind Freddy Krueger's iconic sweater thing that he has, specifically behind the color combo that they chose for it. When I was little, I always thought that Freddy Krueger's sweater was red and black. Obviously, it was a shade of red and green. Mm-hmm. And the reason that this specific shade of red and green was chosen, Wes Craven chose it because it's scientifically considered hard on the eye. So he wanted to choose something that was going to be really grating to the eye. So the idea was to make Freddy Krueger as unpleasant as possible and as hard for people to process visually as possible, as a way to kind of make him stand out.
I always associate red and green with Christmas colors, but okay.
Robert Englund, who plays Freddy Krueger, to great effect, by the way. I when I talk about how this movie was really campy and fun, I have heard all of my adult life how just fun a character Freddy Krueger is for people who, as adults, watch the movies again and are able to enjoy them and are not quite so terrorized by them as they were when they first came out in theaters. So I had heard that he was a really fun character. And I thought that I would absolutely agree after watching this first one. I thought that he was so over the top. And by the end of it, when, Nancy's kind of kicking his butt, laying out all kinds of booby traps for him in her house, you almost kind of feel bad for the guy, because you're like, this man is doing his best and she is just like fumbling him left and right. And so I thought that I can see now why people love Freddy Krueger so much. He's very, very fun. He had to fight for that fedora as part of Freddy Krueger's look. He wanted something very striking, and the studio and movie execs kept trying out all of these other dumpy hats on him. Like they were putting him in baseball caps and...
Oh, gosh.
Like that would have looked so dumb, and all kinds of other stuff. And he finally was like, a cowboy hat. He finally was like, the fedora is this is what's right. Let me do this. And so the rest is history. And then the last thing, Veronica, did you know Peter Jackson once wrote A Nightmare on Elm Street sequel that was never made.
I did not know that, but I did know that Peter Jackson, his whole history before he took on the Lord of the Rings, which makes it all the more like he wasn't a well-known director, and most of his, prior work history up until then was kind of like, low budget horror type stuff. That was his where he came from. So it makes it all the more miraculous that New Line Studios trusted him to go film 3 ambitious fantasy movies like back to back. But I did not know he had written a sequel for Nightmare, but I did know that he comes from a gory horror, background.
Well, I mean, I wonder if I think that that's something that he should absolutely revisit, because I think that would be very intriguing to see how he might do that, how he might envision the world of Freddy Krueger through his eyes. So that's just sort of my interesting info on Nightmare on Elm Street. I really loved it. I'm looking forward to, so then when we come back, not next week, but week after, we'll have a little similar segment like this where we'll be talking about films 2 and 3. Now, I suspect as we get further along... I
cannot vouch for the quality of all those.
Well, I was going to say, I suspect as we get further along in the franchise, I'm hopeful that these films stay great, but I'm also thinking that they might be a little bit scarier and maybe a little bit more intense, just because as time progresses, we get into the later 80s, early 90s, and certainly as the budget for this film goes up, I expect that it's just going to be potentially a scarier, more graphic story. So I may not enjoy the subsequent movies as much, but that doesn't mean that they won't be great. So I'm looking forward to watching them. So yeah, because there's 5 of them, and because I don't want to drag this on forever, we're going to knock out 2 when we come back week after next. We'll be talking about films 2 and 3. Veronica, we're going to talk about book bans. We're going to talk about the writer's strike in particular and book bans. And I had kind of told you, I sent you this article that I looked at that kind of prompted it. I read an article a couple weeks ago called "What Book Bans and the Hollywood Writers' Strike Have in Common" by Heather McDonald, and it was for the Pennsylvania Capital Star. And it was just a commentary that I thought was really interesting because it kind of highlighted a little bit of the agenda behind book bans, and the agenda behind what's going on with the writer's strike are not necessarily the same, but the fact that they're coinciding, the fact that they're happening at the same time in our climate is dangerous. And she kind of goes into reasons why. So I'm going to quote a little bit from the article. She says, in 2022 alone, at least 2,571 unique books were banned or challenged. The American Library Association reports that challenges to books have doubled in the past year through organized efforts. And all of this is in an effort to reshape our country's access to information. What makes this troubling is that this is all happening at the same time that the writer's strike is happening. So I confess that I do not know enough about the writer's strike to be able to talk too much about it intelligently, but just a little bit of background on it. Every 3 years, the Writers Guild of America, or the WGA, negotiates a contract with the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. And so back in May, of the more than 11,000 members of that guild, 98% voted in support of a writer's strike, which started on May 2nd and has been going ever since. Basically, the idea is that if we're targeting these books that represent and tell the stories of underrepresented communities in America, marginalized groups in America, and then we're also, it's worth noting that the last major writer's strike in 2007, since that time, the WGA has only become younger and more diverse. And so the fact that we have writers in the guild who are representative of those marginalized groups, those underrepresented groups, the fact that we have writers in the guild who are then telling those stories that are so important right now in representing the voices and lives of people who we don't normally get to see in film and TV, essentially because of greed and corruption, we're kind of making sure that those voices, those writer voices, voices stay marginalized, stay underrepresented, are even silenced, if things don't resolve for this writer's strike quickly. The fact that that's happening at the same time that we're also targeting these stories, these important stories. And it's worth noting, but an overwhelming number of the books that are being banned are stories that represent LGBTQIA people. So, there is a quote in the commentary piece from a representative from Connecticut. He's a Democratic state representative, Matt Blumenthal, who says the worrying part is that there are people who want to deprive individuals of these stories, these perspectives, who want to impose their will on others. He goes on to say if there is a positive side to this, it would be that by doing this, the people who are targeting these stories and who are trying to silence these writers, these books, they are admitting that if people get these ideas, they will find them persuasive. They will find them enlightening. So it's about determining who gets to be the protagonist in the story of America. That's how he ends the quote. I'll be sure to share that article with everybody. But the bottom line, when it comes to book bans is that we shouldn't really be banning what people read. And then when it comes to things like the writer's strike, I think the bottom line is just stand with labor, pay people for their work, pay people what they're worth.
100%.
But the other thing I wanted to ask, Ron, because you and I, for our family, we just finished reading The Devil's Highway, and I did not get to hear what you thought of that book. So even though
this
isn't, yes, we had technical difficulties. So The Devil's Highway is not a scary book, but it would fall under the scope of, I guess, like true, not even like true crime, just a tragedy. It's a true story, obviously. So Ron,
it's
you want to
nonfiction. It's a nonfiction. Yeah.
You want to tell people what it's about?
So it's a nonfiction book. The author is Luis Alberto Urrea, and I'm just going to kind of read the back of the blurb because it's pretty short. It says, in May 2001, a group of men attempted to cross the Mexican border into the desert of southern Arizona through the deadliest region of the continent, the Devil's Highway. And 3 years later, Luis Alberto Urrea wrote about what happened to them. So it really is it's a nonfiction book, but he tells it, and nonfiction is not generally my genre. It's not something that I read a lot of. And I chose to listen to the audiobook, which is actually narrated by the author himself. And that's usually hit or miss because, generally audiobooks are narrated by not necessarily people who have voice acting experience, but at least people who have the ability to do different voices for different characters, who kind of inflect a little bit of emotion and action into the narrative. And sometimes authors don't really have that ability. They're good writers. They're not necessarily good at conveying emotion and action through speaking and through reading. But he actually did a really good job. Nonfiction tends to be a little bit dry for me, which is why on the rare occasions when I do read it, I usually choose audiobook versions. But he read it with a lot of emotion. Humor was there when it was appropriate. He just did a really good job. So if people are interested in reading this book, obviously the book is great, but I highly recommend the audiobook version as well. But he documents the journey of these men who made the trek through, and he gives us the point of perspective of not only those men who are trying to get to the United States for just financial benefit, to improve the lives of their families back home. It also gives insight into the coyotes and what their motivation is. And it's, there were a little bit of surprises there for me in terms of humanizing them a little bit. He also gave perspective to how the system works as a whole, from the Border Patrol agents down to Mexican consuls, and just how the whole system works and in a lot of ways doesn't work. So it really flew by. It was a quick read, which again, for nonfiction genre, sometimes it takes me longer to make my way through it. But, it was really eye-opening. It was really interesting. It read almost like a story. The way the writer kind of structured the narrative. It had emotional beats, which again, nonfiction doesn't always do for me. I think there was a point in there near the end when I teared up when when a couple of the walkers, is what they call them, the people that are crossing from Mexico to the U.S., when they didn't survive, it really just kind of touched my heart. So
Yeah.
It was generally a good read. I gotta admit, I was kind of a little meh about going into it just because it's nonfiction and that's not what I typically read. But this was really good. I really enjoyed it, and I'm really glad I read it.
Yeah, I agree with you. It read like a story, and I, because he's a poet. Luis is a poet. Really beautifully. I thought really beautifully written. One of the things that just to fill everybody in, we read this book as like a family group read. We're like, we're gonna read a book together and discuss it over Zoom, and it kind of worked, kind of didn't, because we had technical difficulties. But what I was telling our family when I was talking about it was that when he is describing, like when they find the bodies in the desert and they're bringing them back home, and they're kind of making their final journey to be returned home back to Mexico for burial. I thought that was really beautifully written. It was sweet and touching and moving, and I wasn't like sobbing reading. I mean, the sad reality is that these are just stories that have been in existence for far too long, thanks to, as you pointed out, our broken immigration system. So, I mean, unfortunately, these tragedies have continued well past this particular one, which happened
the men crossed in 2001.
Okay, yeah.
So this all went down.
Yeah. So, I mean, unfortunately, the reality is that we have seen tragedies very similar to this unfold along the border and crossing into parts of Arizona. We've seen this again and again and again over the years, unfortunately. So you're almost inclined to read about these things with a certain amount of emotional numbness. But I thought the way he wrote it was really beautiful and eloquent. All right, friends, that's going to wrap it up for us in this latest Revisited episode. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Don't Watch at Night is a Nest production. Executive producers are Valerie and me. Editing by Valerie. Music by Omar Chakor. Special thanks to Lorenzo Villarreal and Alex Street for production support for this episode. Listen to any new episodes every other Monday, and if you like our show, give us a rate and a review. It's the best way to help us grow.